Texas, 1887. The heat clung to the air like a stubborn mule, and the sun was hanging high, beating down on the town of Dustwater with no mercy. The wooden storefronts leaned tired-like, their signs faded and crooked, and the dust in the street swirled with every step a boot made. Now, Dustwater wasn't known for much, except cattle, trouble, and an auction block that drew folk from all over the county. Ranchers, drifters, traders, and the like. It was on this particular summer afternoon that a man by the name of Silas McComb rode into town. Tall, broad-shouldered, and quiet as a church on Monday. He didn't speak unless it was worth saying, and even then, his words came slow and deliberate, like a creek after a dry spell. Silas wasn't looking to buy nothing that day, just came to trade feed and pick up some nails. But fate has a way of tossing her cards without a skin. As he was hitching his horse outside the mercantile, he heard the auctioneer call out something that stopped him cold. Next up, a woman and her twin girls. Crippled from birth, they say. Can't walk right, but strong arms and gentle hands. Sold together, no splitting, no questions. Silas turned. Sure enough, there they stood, 3 figures in the shadow of the courthouse, looking out of place like spring blooms in a saloon. The woman, not much older than 30, leaned hard on a makeshift cane, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle, but her back was straight, her jaw set. The girls, identical as sunrise, clung to her skirt, eyes wide and wary. The crowd shifted, some curious, some sneering. The auctioneer, red-faced and loud, waved his hat to stir bids. Silas had seen plenty of ugly in his time, wars, fires, broken men left to die on trails. But this was a different kind of wrong. Folks auctioning off people like sacks of grain. Even in Texas, where the law ran thin and decency thinner, this felt like rot in the roots. He stepped forward, slow and steady. "What's the price?" he asked, voice low. The auctioneer blinked, caught off guard. Starting at $20. 10. Silas replied flat. A few laughs rose from the crowd. The auctioneer scoffed. "They ain't livestock, mister." "Didn't look like you thought they was people neither." Silas shot back. Silence settled. Then someone called 12. Another. 15. Silas reached into his saddlebag and tossed a worn leather pouch onto the platform. $35. And a promise they won't never be sold again. That shut him up. The auctioneer paused, shrugged, then nodded. Sold. To the man with the grim face and kind coin. The woman didn't move, just stared at Silas with eyes that had seen too much. "I ain't no saint," he said, meeting her gaze, "but I reckon nobody deserves to be bought and sold like a mule. Come on now. Let's get you out of this, son." She hesitated, then took his offered hand. Her girls followed, wary but obedient. As they walked away from the square, someone whispered, "He just bought himself trouble." Maybe, but Silas had a feeling. Trouble ain't always what it seems. Sometimes, it's the only way light finds its way in. The wagon rocked gentle down the dirt road west of Dustwater, the kind of trail that don't show up on maps, just old memory and worn-out hoof tracks. Silas drove the reins with a practiced hand, the sun hanging heavy behind him like a lazy eye watching close. The woman sat beside him in silence. Her name, he'd learn, was Maybelle. She spoke soft and careful, like each word had to be measured, for it passed her lips. The girls, Lily and June, huddled in the back, eyes wide as prairie moons, clutching a little sack of keepsakes, some ribbon, a broken comb, and a threadbare Bible with no cover. "I ain't got much," Silas said finally, keeping his eyes on the trail. "Just a patch of land near High Mesa. Water runs thin but steady. Cabin small. Barn leaks when the wind's wrong. But it's quiet. Safe." Maybelle nodded, her fingers wrapped tight round that cane of hers. "Quiet sounds mighty fine." They rode in that quiet for a spell. The sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the sage. June sang a little tune, something sweet and wordless. Lily hummed along. It weren't much, but it was enough to stir something in Silas's chest he hadn't felt in years. By the time they reached the fork in the trail, dusk had settled like a blanket over the hills. The cabin came into view, just a squat shape against the firelit sky, smoke curling from the chimney like it was glad to see him. "Best I can offer," Silas muttered, swinging down from the wagon. He helped Maybelle down, her bad leg trembling with each step. "You ever see a doctor?" he asked, steadying her elbow. "Ain't no doctor fixes what's born broken," she said, but not bitter. Inside, the place was rough-hewn but clean. One big room, a hearth with last night's ash still warm, a table with 2 chairs, and a bed in the corner with a mattress that had seen better years. Silas brought in a pile of blankets, laid them out on the floor for the girls. "They'll be all right here," he said, nodding. "You take the bed." Maybelle started to argue, but her body gave her no say in the matter. She sank down slow, a sigh catching in her throat like wind through old fence slats. "Thank you," she said, the words barely a whisper. Later, after the girls had drifted off in their blanket nest and the fire crackled low, Silas sat on the porch with a tin cup of coffee. Maybelle joined him, her cane tapping soft against the floorboards. "You didn't have to do what you did," she said, staring into the stars. Silas sipped his coffee. "Didn't feel right, leaving you there." "They call it charity," she said, "but charity's got teeth. Folks give with one hand and take with the other." "I ain't looking to take nothing," he said. She looked at him then, eyes soft but sharp. "That the truth?" Silas nodded. "Reckon it is." They sat in silence after that, listening to the coyotes cry and the wind rustle the dry grass. Out here, under a sky bigger than any man's troubles, even the wounded could breathe a little easier. And deep down, in some place he hadn't looked at in years, Silas McComb started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he brought home more than just a family in need. Maybe he'd found the one thing he never thought he'd see again. Hope. Morning came slow and golden, stretching over high mesa like a lazy cat. Silas was up before the rooster crowed, stoking the fire and fixing a bit of cornbread and beans. Weren't much, but filled the belly and warmed the bones. The girls woke first, Lily peeking round the edge of her blanket, hair a wild tangle of straw-blonde curls. June followed, rubbing sleep from her eyes and looking at Silas like he might vanish if she blinked too long. "Y'all like eggs?" he asked, holding up the basket he'd brought in from the coop. June nodded. Lily just stared, still holding that old Bible to her chest like it might fly off if she let go. Maybelle stirred not long after, wincing as she sat up. Her leg had stiffened overnight, and it took some doing to get her moving. Silas handed her a mug of coffee, dark and bitter. "You ain't got to keep serving me like some helpless thing," she muttered, though she took the cup with both hands. "Ain't serving. Just sharing the morning," he replied, easing into the chair beside her. That day they got to work. Silas showed the girls how to feed the chickens, haul water from the pump, and sweep the porch with an old straw broom that had more handle than bristle. They didn't complain. In fact, June smiled for the first time since Dust Water, and Lily, quiet as she was, began following Silas like a shadow. He noticed things as the days passed. The way Maybelle kept count of every dry bean and every pinch of flour. The way she mended her cane every evening with little strips of cloth and patience. She didn't ask for help, but she didn't push it away neither. One evening, as the sun bled out across the plains and the air turned soft with twilight, Silas found her sitting by the garden bed. Not that it was much of a garden, just some stubborn shoots of corn and beans fighting through cracked earth. "These ever grow?" she asked, not looking at him. "Sometimes," he said. "Not often." She nodded slow. "Still, you keep planting. Ain't no harvest without hope," he said. She smiled just barely, but it was real. "My daddy used to say that. Ain't no point in giving up unless the dirt gives up first." They sat there a long time, saying nothing else, just breathing in the cool night air, listening to the crickets and the wind moving through the grass. Later that night, after the girls were asleep and the fire burned low, Maybelle spoke again, her voice soft. "Silas, what made you stop that auction?" He didn't answer right away, just stared into the flames, eyes reflecting memories older than scars. "Once knew a woman," he said finally. Kind eyes, sweet laugh. "We were going to build a life together. Then she got took. Some rich rancher up near Llano. Said she owed him money. Sheriff turned his back. I ain't done nothing. Been regretting that ever since. Maybelle didn't say a word, but her hand rested gently on his arm, just for a second. A gesture like a whisper. I ain't looking to make up for the past, he added. But maybe I can do better now. She nodded, her eyes glinting in the firelight. Maybe we both can. And so, a man with ghosts and a woman with wounds sat together in the quiet of a Texas night. Not as strangers, not quite yet as family, but somewhere in between. The kind of place where things start to grow, even in dry earth. The weeks passed gentle, like a soft summer wind. High Mesa, for all its dryness, held a certain peace if you knew how to listen. The cottonwoods near the creek rustled like old folks murmuring secrets, and the sky turned a deeper blue than most dreams dared to reach. Maybelle and the girls took to life on the homestead like it was stitched into their bones. June laughed more now, chasing chickens and trying to lasso a goat that didn't want no part of it. Lily remained quiet, but she'd sit close to Silas in the evenings, leaning her head against his arm as he whittled or told stories, with a voice slow and rich as molasses. Maybelle, well, she had a fire in her yet. Her hands worked like they were born to mend and build, patching fences, churning butter, even crafting a brace for a bad leg out of old leather straps and horseshoe nails. Silas watched her move, watched her endure, and every day he saw less of a crippled woman and more of a storm that refused to break. Then came the rider. It was a Sunday, and Silas had just come back from the well when he saw dust rising down the trail. One rider. Fast. Coat flapping like a flag of trouble. Silas didn't say a word, just set down the bucket and walked to the porch, hand drifting toward the rifle handgun inside the door. Maybelle stepped out behind him, limp slow, but her eyes sharp. You know him? No, but he knows something. The rider pulled up hard, dust settling like ash round him. Young, pale, nervous. He wore a badge on his chest, one of them makeshift ones they hand out to fellas willing to bleed for $10 a week. You Silas McComb? He asked, breathing heavy. I am. The rider looked past him, toward Maybelle and the girls, then back. There's word out of Dustwater. Fella came through town looking for a woman. Crippled, traveling with twins. Said she's his property. Got papers. Silas's face turned hard as river rock. That's so. He's got 2 men with him, the rider added, and he ain't looking to talk. Maybelle's hand tightened round her cane. His name's Garrett Vaughn, she said, voice like cracked glass. I know him. He's the reason I couldn't walk. The girls, he ain't their father. He's just a man who broke everything and claimed it as his. Silas didn't speak for a long time, just stared off into the hills where the rider had come from. Then he nodded. You tell this Garrett Vaughn, he said slow, that he's welcome to come, but he best be ready to ride home alone. The rider blinked. You sure, mister? Man's got law on his side. Silas gave a half-smile, cold as a January wind. The law don't live out here. Only right and wrong, and I reckon I know the difference. That night, Silas oiled his rifle. Maybelle sharpened a kitchen knife, with hands that didn't shake. The girls were tucked in early, and though the air was thick with worry, not a soul in that cabin spoke of running. They'd all run long enough. Out here, under the stars, they were something more than broken souls and old stories. They were a family now, fragile, maybe, but real. And no man, no matter how loud his claim or how heavy his coin, was going to tear that apart without a fight. The wind had a smell to it that morning. Burnt sage and something meaner. Silas knew that scent. He'd smelled it on the edges of battle. Right for a man did something foolish with a loaded gun. It weren't just weather rolling in, it was a reckoning. He was standing out by the fence post, checking the line, when he saw him. 3 riders moving in slow from the east, each man cast in silhouette against the blazing sky. At the front was a fella tall and proud, wearing a black duster and a smugness that didn't sit well in the light. That's him, Maybelle said from behind, her voice tight. She'd come out despite her limp, her cane digging into the dry earth like a stake. You sure? Sure as I know my own scars. That's Garrett Vaughn. Silas didn't reach for his rifle, just yet. He waited. Let them ride all the way to the gate, dust settling round their boots like fog. Vaughn dismounted first. He moved like a man who thought the world owed him something. His eyes found Maybelle, then slid to Silas with a snake smile. "Well now," he said, drawling every word like molasses. "Ain't this cozy? Maybelle, you run off and started yourself a little homestead? Took the girls too, I hear. You forget you was under contract." Maybelle didn't blink. "You mean the paper you made me sign after breaking my leg? After locking me in a cellar for speaking out loud?" Vaughn chuckled, dark and low. "I mean the one that said you belonged to my house, and everything in it." "She ain't in your house no more," Silas said. "She's under mine, and this ain't a place where men own women." Vaughn's smile faded. He stepped closer, one hand hovering near his belt. Not on his gun, not yet, but close enough to whisper intentions. "I got legal claim, mister. I came all this way to collect." "And I'm telling you," Silas said, "you're riding back without her." The two men behind Vaughn shifted. Hired guns, no doubt, grime on their coats, twitch in their eyes. Silas could smell the blood on him. Maybelle gripped her cane tighter. Vaughn looked past Silas to the cabin. His eyes finned in the window where Lily and June peeked out. His voice turned colder. "You think this ends pretty? I got papers. I got witnesses. I got money. You think some backwoods farmer's gonna keep me from taking what's mine?" Silas moved then, slow, deliberate. He didn't draw his rifle, not yet. Just stepped between Vaughn and the cabin, his shadow long and solid in the dirt. "I ain't the law," he said, voice quiet. "I don't wear a badge, and I don't take sides I ain't sure of. But I seen enough wrong in my life to know this. If you cross that line, try to touch one hair on them girls' heads, you won't see another sunrise." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Vaughn smiled again, mean this time. "You think you're protecting them? You just signed their death warrant." He turned, spitting in the dust. "We'll be back," he called over his shoulder. "And next time, we ain't talking." They rode off, slow and bold, like they wanted to be remembered. Silas stood watch till the dust cleared. Maybelle stepped up beside him, eyes glinting. "We can't run," she said. "I know," Silas answered. She looked at him long and steady. "Then we prepare." The fire had been lit, and come the next sundown, High Mesa would no longer be a refuge. It'd be a battleground. The wind was restless that night. His sin through the mesquite like it knew what was coming. Silas spent the dark hours moving quiet through the barn, oiling hinges, checking traps, and loading every round he had. The air held that stillness, the kind that comes before a gunfight or a bad dream. Maybelle stayed by the fire, her leg propped, knife in hand, sharpening slow and steady. Her girls were asleep in the loft, curled up like kittens, not knowing that the world outside their window had teeth. "I've been running most my life," Maybelle said, breaking the silence. "First from a drunken father, then from a husband who thought a woman's silence was part of the vows. Then Vaughn, always hiding, always hoping." Silas didn't answer right away, just laid another log on the fire and watched the sparks dance up the chimney. "This ain't running," he said finally. "This is standing that." Outside, the moon hung full and sharp, casting the land in silver. Around the cabin, Silas had rigged a handful of surprises, tripwires, old cans, even a pair of spring traps he'd used for coyotes. Weren't much, but it might buy him a breath when the shooting started. At dawn, the dust rose again. 3 riders. Vaughn, right in front like a general. His 2 hired guns flanked him like shadows. Silas stood in the open, rifle across his chest. Maybelle at his side with her jaw set like iron. "You got one last chance, McComb," Vaughn hollered from the trail. "Hand her over and nobody has to bleed." Silas didn't flinch. "You had your say. This here's ours." Vaughn nodded slow. "So be it." The moment his hand dropped, lead flew. Silas dove left, his first shot knocking Vaughn's rifle clean from his hands. Maybelle crouched low, let fly with a kitchen knife that sunk into one rider's thigh. He screamed, toppled from his horse. The other gunman charged forward, but not for long. One of Silas's trip lines caught his stirrup, yanking him clean out of the saddle. He hit the ground hard, and a second later, the spring trap bit into his leg with a sound that curdled the blood. Gunfire roared like thunder. Vaughn, crawling for his pistol, got a face full of dirt and a boot from Silas. "You want her?" Silas growled, pinning him down. "She ain't yours. She never was." Vaughn's eyes were wide now, fear pushing past arrogance. "You gonna kill me?" Silas looked toward the cabin. Maybelle stood framed in the door, a loaded rifle cradled like a child. "No," Silas said, "but she might." Maybelle walked slow, every limb carrying years of pain and fury. She raised the rifle, but not to kill. Just enough to put the barrel inches from Vaughn's face. "You come back here again," she said, voice low and even, "and I won't aim so kind." They let him crawl away, his pride gutted and his men broken. He'd ride off, they knew. Maybe to lick his wounds, maybe to plot revenge, but he wouldn't forget, and he wouldn't come easy. That evening, as the sky bled into dusk and the fire cracked gentle, Silas sat with Lily on one knee and June nestled at Maybelle's side. "This ain't over," Maybelle said. "No," Silas agreed, "but it's beginning." That cabin, once just a place to lay his head, had turned into something else. A home, a fortress, a line drawn in the dust where a man made his stand. 3 days passed, and the land held its breath. No riders, no shots, just wind and the silence that follows a storm. But even quiet can wear a man thin, like boots treading too long over stone. Silas spent the mornings walking the perimeter, rifle slung low, eyes always to the horizon. Maybelle tended the hens and stirred stew with a wooden spoon, though her eyes wandered too often to the hills. Lily took to carry in that tattered Bible like it was armor. And June, she started singing again, little soft songs she made up herself, about goats and stars and brave men with old guns. They were trying to live, but on the fourth morning, the rain came. Not a drizzle, not the pitiful kind that teased the dirt. This was real rain, big, fat drops that slapped the roof like fists and turned the dust to mud. The sky cracked open and poured its heart out, and in that rain, Silas found something else. A rider, alone, hat low, slicker flapping, riding straight into the storm. Silas met him at the gate, boots sinking into the mud. The man dismounted, slow and calm. He was older, beard streaked with white, a long scar right in his cheekbone like lightning carved in skin. "You McComb?" the man asked. "I am." He nodded, tugged a soaked envelope from inside his coat. "From Judge Worthen. Signed order. Vaughn's claim's been stripped. Writ of freedom for Maybelle Morris and her daughters." Silas didn't move, just blinked against the rain. "He tried to buy the court," the man went on, "but the judge's got a soft spot for women who ain't afraid to fight." Silas took the paper with a nod, then stepped aside. "Come in. Warm up." The stranger shook his head. "Ain't staying. Just doing my duty. You tell Miss Maybelle. She's free now. For good." With that, he mounted up and vanished back into the storm, like a ghost with a job done. Back in the cabin, Silas handed Maybelle the wet envelope. She read it twice, lips parting, breath catching, like it was caught between crying and Logan. "They can't take us now," she whispered. "They can't take us." "No, ma'am," Silas said. "They can't." She looked up at him. Her face changed. Not just relief, but something deeper. A weight gone. A wound starting to close. "Then what now?" she asked. Silas shrugged, a slow smile rising. "Now we build." And they did. That afternoon, Silas and the girls started mending the garden rows, working in the mud like pigs in clover. Maybelle, leg brace and all, planted seeds with her bare hands. Rain still fell, soft and steady, the first real rain in weeks. It soaked the earth, filled the barrel by the door, and ran off the roof in sweet, steady streams. Lily danced in it. June sang. And Maybelle, she laughed. Sometimes it ain't the shooting, or the threats that mark a turning point. Sometimes it's the rain, the way it falls, the way it cleanses, the way it tells you life might just be worth growing again. The days that followed the rain were filled with the kind of quiet work that keeps the soul steady. The creek ran higher, the garden sprouted green, and the hens clucked like they had stories to tell. Even the goats seemed calmer, like they too knew peace had finally rooted itself in that patch of land. Inside the cabin, change moved slow but sure. Silas built a new chair for Maybelle, one with arms and a cushion he stuffed with cotton from a neighbor's patch. He carved her name into the back, not bold, just enough to say it was hers. Maybelle pretended not to notice, but every time she sat in it, her hands lingered on the carved letters a little longer. The girls, too, were changing. Lily had taken to help in Silas with the animals. She never said much, but she watched close, learned quick. One afternoon, she even helped deliver a breech calf, her hands steady while Silas worked the rope. Afterward, she didn't speak, just leaned against him with a kind of quiet pride he wouldn't forget. June, meanwhile, had discovered the old fiddle stored in the loft. It was missing 2 strings and was tuned about as bad as a coyote's howl, but she played anyway, slow, awkward tunes that somehow filled the house with a warmth no fire could touch. Then one night, under a moon so bright it turned the prairie silver, Maybelle found Silas sitting on the porch, staring out over the land like it might disappear if he blinked. "You ever think," she said, easing into her chair, "this might be the end of the road for you?" Silas didn't look at her. "I used to think I was a man passing through, never meant to stop. But this place, you three, feels more like home than anything I ever knew." Maybelle smiled, the kind that didn't need to reach the lips to be real. "Then maybe you weren't just passing. Maybe you were searching." Silas finally turned, his eyes meeting hers in the moonlight. "And maybe," he said, "I found it." They sat like that a long while. No rush, no need for more. Later, as they stepped inside and shut the door behind them, the fire crackled warm in the hearth. The girls slept sound, curled together on the cot. The cabin smelled of bread and lavender, and for the first time in years, there was no fear tucked into the corners. Just love, plain and quiet, like a seed finally breaking through the dirt. Out on the range, life still held its dangers. But here at High Mesa, hearts were mended, and futures were beginning. Summer rolled on like a slow song, the kind you hum without thinking. The land turned green in places Silas had never seen green before, and even the wild mesquite trees seemed to soften. High Mesa had become something else, a place not just to live, but to belong. Silas rode out early most days, mend in fence lines and check in on the distant springs that fed their little garden. But he always came back by sundown, not because he had to, because he wanted to. One evening, he returned to find June sitting on the roof. "What in thunder are you doing up there?" he called. She grinned, gap-toothed and proud, watching the stars come out. Silas laughed and helped her down, muttering about children and necks waiting to be broke. But inside it warmed him. That girl had laughter in her bones now. Real laughter. Lily was changing too, slow but sure. She took to reading the Bible aloud to Maybelle every evening, her voice soft, like she was learning how to speak again. Her words weren't just scripture. They were healing. And Maybelle, well, she was walking without her cane more often now. The brace Silas had fashioned was rough, but it worked. She moved through the cabin like she owned every inch of it, which, truth be told, she did. Then came the day Silas took her up to the ridge. He'd been clearing brush near the east slope and found a place, a little rise above the river with a view that stretched all the way to the hills of Llano in the distance. He'd built a bench there, simple, sturdy. He brought Maybelle up just as the sun was setting. She sat in silence, watching the light pour gold over the land. "This where you go to think?" she asked. "Sometimes." "And what do you think about?" He hesitated. "You." She turned, surprised. Silas cleared his throat. "I've spent years alone, Maybelle, walking roads that led nowhere, fighting ghosts I couldn't name. But since you brought them girls here, I've been thinking different." She looked at him long and quiet. "You ain't just talking about gratitude, are you?" "No, ma'am," he said. "I'm talking about a life. Not the one I had, the one I want." The sky deepened to rose and lavender. Crickets started their chorus in the grass below. Maybelle laid her hand over his, rough calluses against sunburned skin. "If you mean to build something, I'll build it with you." They sat like that till the stars came out, and not a word passed between them that wasn't already understood. There on the ridge above the river, two people with broken pasts made a silent vow. A vow stronger than any contract, deeper than any wound. The next spring came with wildflowers bursting across the hills like a promise kept. The rains had been kind, and the land around High Mesa breathed easier than it had in years. Even the air seemed lighter, like the wind itself had laid down its burdens. Silas stood on the porch one early morning, coffee in hand, watching the girls chase a stray calf back toward the pen, their laughter carrying over the field like bells. He smiled, real and deep, the kind that rises from a place no wound ever touched. Inside, Maybelle was folding laundry. Her limp was still there, but it no longer defined her. It was part of her gait, not her story. She moved with a purpose now, like a woman who'd survived the fire and come out forged, not burnt. The cabin had changed. New shelves lined the walls, built by Silas and painted by June with clumsy brush strokes and too much joy. Lily kept a journal now, the Bible resting on a table nearby, not as a crutch, but a compass. Then came the letter. It arrived by rider, addressed to Mrs. Maybelle McComb. No mistake. The name was clear. She'd taken it quietly, after a spring morning on the ridge, with only the preacher, the girls, and the sunrise to witness. No frills. Just a truth spoken between two hearts that had waited long enough. The letter was from the county court, confirmation that the charges against Garrett Vaughn had stuck. Fraud, assault, unlawful claims. He'd fled the state before they could put him in irons. Last seen riding north with no allies and no gold. Maybelle read the letter, folded it slow, and tossed it into the fire. She didn't need the past anymore. She had the present, and the present was good. That night, they all sat outside on the porch. June played her fiddle better now, almost in tune, and Lily leaned against Silas's side, her head resting just below his arm. Maybelle sat close, their fingers laced together like roots in the soil. "You ever think about leaving again?" she asked him. Silas shook his head. "Not since you got here." She smiled. "Then I guess this is home." The stars blinked above, the kind of sky that only Texas knows, wide, wild, and full of things not yet spoken. The wind rustled the tall grass. A coyote called out somewhere beyond the ridge, and all of it felt right. High Mesa didn't make him rich, didn't make him safe from every trouble, but it gave him each other. And sometimes, that's all the miracle a soul needs.